how are you starting your go-to-market plan a year out or 2 years out? We're used to doing it 3 months from CO, not a year out, certainly not 24 months out.
We have a more concerted branding effort for our properties. And that conversation starts basically when we break ground. And we're starting to name the property and build the brand and do the market research on what this brand really needs to emanate, and then how that brand is going to also be present within the walls of our building as well. That should not happen 3 months before your opening. It's way too late then.
On this episode, I'm speaking with Autumn Hunt, Head of Marketing for CIP Communities, where she oversees a team dedicated to all digital marketing, advertising, product marketing, customer experience, analytics, and sales enablement for more than 40 entities. She's worked at the intersection of marketing, sales, and tech her whole career, and has leveraged her academic background in business and data analytics to create marketing that matters for customers and employees. Autumn has a degree in psychology, an M.B.A. with a specialization in marketing, and several certifications, including advanced product marketing from the Product Marketing Institute. In her free time, you can find her spending time with her husband and 3-year-old daughter, reading or listening to audiobooks or podcasts, and cooking Italian or Thai food. This was a really great conversation about all things marketing and multifamily, so let's jump right in. All right, Autumn. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really glad to have you on Transforming Cities. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, if you know anything about TC, I always like to get into the nitty gritty of your background. And I know for you, you've been born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska. You're still there today, but I'd love to hear about just like the early years and kind of why you've decided to stay in Lincoln.
Yeah, great question. You're right. Born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska. Although it's grown tremendously since I was a kid. We definitely are a college town. We don't have any pro sports. So what we have is Huskers, although the women's sports at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln have been killing it recently. We're about 300,000 people now, which when I was younger, I think it was like 240,000 people. So in terms of housing, I mean, we could talk about that and what that's done for the Lincoln market. Yeah, in Nebraska, it's Lincoln and Omaha is our main cities. And fun fact, on Nebraska Husker game days in the football stadium at Memorial Stadium, it's the third largest city in the state of Nebraska. So it's Omaha, Lincoln, and then actual Memorial Stadium.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty big, small town. There's just enough to do, but I know me and my husband, we like to travel far and wide. So when we go on vacation, we go far. I mean, we're right smack in the middle of the country. My husband and I, we actually met in high school, and so we're the high school sweethearts. And then what kept us here? So I did my MBA here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I'm like, okay, now's the time to like figure out where we want to go. And we're very type A people. So we got our spreadsheet out, and years ago we were figuring out like what was most meaningful to us. We looked at crime rates, we looked at cost of living, things like that. And there wasn't a lot that measured up against Lincoln, Nebraska. And our families are here in Lincoln, Nebraska too. And so that's where like we'll stay. And it's funny too, because I was at a conference last week and everybody's introducing themselves and they're like, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska. And they're like, oh. And they're like, why are you still there? But honestly, it's a really wonderful town. And anybody who comes through here, either on business or otherwise, I think they have a good time. But as far as my childhood, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you told me about your childhood as being like normal in all of the best of ways. And I was curious, like what that meant for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I went to school, I got good grades. I had a really close circle of people around me. When I look at like what's important, especially now raising a kid, I think, I had it great in a lot of ways. And I think too, when I was a kid and reflecting back on it now, particularly in my professional life, I was always really curious and competitive. And what's really carried through with me are those two qualities, and particularly being really inquisitive. So I always remember learning as a kid. And I remember sitting on my bedroom floor and I had the Guinness Book of World Records, and I read that thing front cover to cover so many times. And back when, like, pre-internet, we had the encyclopedia books, and I just opened it up to just learn. Um, and so that has always, like, being inquisitive has always been a part of my life. And I'm an academic at heart, so I went and I got my undergrad in psych, and I was going to go on the clinical psychology route, and do something in that manner. And I had some friends who were mental health practitioners, and kind of quickly realized that, like, maybe that wasn't the path for me. And so I reconsidered the mental health side of it. But I also, in the process of that, realized I was most interested in, like, why and how people make decisions. So that's the behavior
Mm.
part of it. And I think that that just leans perfectly into exactly where I found myself and where my passion and career is
Mm.
now.
That ties in really well to a story I hear often, or I should say a theme that I hear often, that so many in the multifamily industry aren't necessarily planning to find themselves in the multifamily industry. So, obviously for you, you went to school for one thing and maybe you transitioned and decided to do something else, or you found your interests lied elsewhere. After school for you, what did that path look like, which then eventually landed you in multifamily?
Yeah. So when I graduated from undergrad, I landed in a marketing and sales enablement role. And I think it was within the first few months, I was like, okay, this is exactly what I wanted to do. So it worked out perfectly. I think it takes a lot of pathways and time for people to figure out what they love and what they're passionate about. I was so lucky to find that early on.
Mm.
And so I dove into that world, on the B2B side and in some agency world, in the agency world as well, on the marketing side. And I wanted, again, I'm a learner. That theme just, like, persists throughout my career. I went back and I got my MBA with a specialization in marketing, um, which was so helpful, particularly on the finance, accounting, and some business side as well. So towards the end of getting my degree there, I'm like, okay, I'm ready for my next thing. And I just stumbled into multifamily like so many other people did. I didn't set out and say I want to work in apartment management. And so I work and I had marketing for CIP Communities now. And it was just a huge opportunity to bring a high level marketing role to an organization where the function really needed to be designed from the ground up and operationalized.
Hmm.
So, I was brought in to oversee traditional marketing revenue metrics, whether it's lead generation. And back then it was a lot more ILS management, which transitioned a lot into predictive advertising models based on vacancies and availabilities. And just across the board, I scaled two functions, marketing and training. And it's been a wild ride.
Yeah. Not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious, like thinking back to that time when you were brought on board, new to the whole world of multifamily. Did any particular piece of that role make you feel like you're kind of out of your depth? I'm thinking about like learning lead gen, ILS, systems, and kind of how everything worked. Does anything stand out to you?
I mean, yeah, there was a lot that stood out to me. It was a learning curve, and um, hiring people into our organization over the years too. There's a few learning curves. You're either learning multifamily or you're learning marketing. Very rarely in Lincoln, Nebraska, can I find a multifamily marketing
Mm,
professional.
yeah.
So there's a learning curve in any capacity. And for me, it was bringing marketing and business in the marketing capacity in multifamily. So the multifamily world, I was learning from the ground up for the first time. So that was my big learning curve.
Mm. And from my understanding, you've had the opportunity to really sort of develop what you call a quasi internal agency now. And I guess as a fellow agency owner, so to speak, kind of trying to make the best decisions possible for an agency team. I'm curious about a couple
Mhm.
things. So, number one, why did your group decide to build this in house? Because not a lot of groups do that, or there is a line in the sand there. And then second, what is the makeup of your in-house team?
Yeah. So I call us a quasi internal agency, and maybe I coined that term for the very first time. I don't know, but we're different in a traditional agency because well, first, let me take a step back. So we're owner operators of all of our assets. That gives marketing a really unique function in an organization where we can be both partners, like strategic partners, and still work as an agent. So we do have some creative and strategic oversight of the departments or the properties, but we work in conjunction with them too. So that's where that agency model was really needed. And so we have a lot of agency to make decisions on behalf of the properties, which is a huge relief to them as well. And prior to or right when I started, there was very little understanding of what the properties really needed to ask for, or like what success looked like in the scope of marketing, what was needed, and particularly as the digital landscape has just blown up over the last 10, 15 years, and particularly in the last 5 to 10 years, there's a lot of technical nuance to marketing that just isn't within their scope of expertise. So that's where we really came in. And what really started that was we developed a ticketing system. So my marketing team jokes all the time, like we need t-shirts that say put in a marketing request, because that's how we want to be communicated, is fill out the form with the exact information that we need, and we will get back to you to help cut down on that back and forth communication. So within that, we really explored on like setting standards for scope of work and process, and exactly what marketing will and will not do. So we're more of a strategic department now, focused on the property's bottom line versus like a creative department. So we're
Mm,
not going to mitigate your creative agency in terms of if you need to create a resident flyer, that's not something that marketing does. Where prior to me, that's something that marketing would do. There's tools of the world that allows them to do that now. So we
mhm,
take a more strategic standpoint on that.
mm,
So it helped clarify the scope of marketing support, the timeliness of requests, and most importantly, like what was a part of the strategy at the time, both like at a broad corporate organization level and then for each entity as well, which there's a lot of variables within that.
yeah.
And in terms of our team makeup, there's a few different marketing functions that I oversee. So creative design and production is one, all things digital, websites, Google being just the entire digital footprint and landscape for each one of our entities. Bottom of the funnel automation and sales enablement, top of the funnel advertising, PPC, social media, um, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a few functions. And then I oversee the team and the strategy and the long-term planning for each property and entity as well.
Yeah, wow, that is a lot of stuff, right? Like there's a long list of things to be having your eye on, or at least having like keeping the pulse on. I'm sure you've had quite a few moments of oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? But what are the learning moments and like key takeaways that you've built, like that or that you've taken away as you've built this essentially like this big internal resource for you and the team?
Yeah. And it was a big learning curve at first, but really when we got our feet wet in it and we started setting the standard operating procedures of the marketing support function, we really started rowing really quickly, and we're in a really good rhythm as a marketing team with the rest of our organization. As far as key learning moments and takeaways, I think the first thing I would say is iterating is key to settling into what works, but not settling in for too long, because there's always a better way to do something.
Mm,
And often what that looks like is process development and employee development, and just developing your expertise and making sure that you're kind of future proofing your marketing strategy for your properties. And then there's also like we still outsource. We still have external vendors that we rely on to help support our marketing functions. We don't do everything in-house. So it's looking at your internal capabilities and deciding what not only what you can handle, but what you want to handle. Um, the other thing too is, like you said, it can be a lot at times, and it certainly can be. It seems like every day there can be a reprioritization of our support, which has been finely balanced over the years. The market dynamics can change along each property's unique requirements. So we must balance our support and really allot it to the property that needs us most at that time, depending on, what that looks like.
mhm.
And then the last piece I think is investing in in-house talent is really crucial. So we're partially a remote team right now, which has brought in a lot of unique talents and market expertise. We have one person in some of our other markets outside of Nebraska. And we wouldn't have that level of expertise if we would be strictly in person. So that's been a huge lift to our marketing support function
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, that's a really challenging part, I think, of growing a well-oiled marketing team machine, for lack of a better phrase. Like which aspects do you bring in-house versus which aspects do you continue to seek outside help from? Um, Again, not to put you on the spot, but is there any sort of like rubrics or like metrics or excuse me, like big matrix you have in front of you where you're like, this is the way that we need to think about making these decisions? Or does it really come at a
Hmm.
point where, like, I feel like for so many it's like when the pain is big enough or the pain is great enough, we'll finally make a move to bring it in house? Do you have a How has that been done
Yeah,
in the past?
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's probably a little less formal than like a matrix on a piece of paper. And I'll maybe give the example of PPC. So we used to do that in-house, and years ago I actually used to manage that. That was an immediate, we shouldn't do this in-house, and anybody who manages Google Ads knows like the platform changes every
Mm,
day,
hmm.
and you have to be in there every day managing those ads and those campaigns. So we actually have vendors and partners that assist us with that, and it's mitigating risk in that manner too. If I had a team member who managed that and there was turnover with that team member, who's going to manage those campaigns on a daily basis? It's going to be 3 to 4 months before I get someone up and running in that role and be able to take on that task. So
Yeah.
that's how I like to think about it: is what is something that is needs constant attention that might be best served for a vendor versus like what are like expertise that we do need in house, or what makes the most sense financially as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Transforming Cities, brought to you by Authentic, delivering premier multifamily brand experiences and smart digital marketing. Authentic's proven approach accelerates leasing velocity, boosts rental rates, and increases long-term value. You can find out more at authenticff.com. And by Charles Gate, the multifamily investor's secret weapon to help underwrite, go to market, and operate projects that generate market-beating returns. With an adaptive staffing model and on-demand leasing teams, Charles Gate empowers a better resident experience at an efficient cost structure for today's owners. Visit charlesgate.com for more. I'm curious, have you always wanted to manage a team? I mean, now that you have a team that you've been building and kind of been working with now for a few years, was that always something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I never thought in my early career that one of my goals was specifically to manage people or to manage a team. I'm a great marketer and I'm a great business person, so managing functions has always been well within my roadmap. I really love the orchestration of marketing and sales in particular, as it helps drive the business. And as my career has progressed over the last decade plus, managing people has just been a natural transition over the years, and it's easily become my favorite part.
Mm,
I really like growing people's careers, talents, and passions, and really ensuring, and this one is really important for me, ensuring that the human element of work can be prioritized. That's really my top objective. Otherwise known as work-life balance,
yeah.
I think, as some other people describe it. But as a function leader, I really think the best thing I can experience is scaling the organization through the brilliance of my team's work and
Mm.
who they are as people.
Yeah, no, I love that. Feel free to not name names, but I'm curious if anyone comes to mind where you feel like it's just such a great success story so far for your management or for you on the team. And in the sense that, maybe someone came on and it was a little bit of a clunky start but then they've really excelled. We know as people managers, you kind of have these moments where you have like these success stories and it was all worth it in the end. Does anything come to mind for
Yeah,
you with your team over the years?
yeah. I have a lot that come to mind, and I think each one of my team members now has a really unique pathway into why are they successful, so successful on the team right now. And for all varying reasons. And I think one of the things is you need to make sure you're hiring the right people and the right talent and the right expertise, but more so as a manager, is I'm giving them autonomy within the scope of their role to make decisions and just building that trust and giving them all of the resources I possibly can to make them
Mm,
successful. So all of my team members are really successful in their own unique way, and they've had a unique individual pathway to get to that success. But I think one of the central points is, as a team leader, I think it's often seen as like hierarchy, but I'm here to support them and make them successful.
mhm. There is an ongoing debate, and I'm definitely a part of this because we have this challenge back and forth with our team at Authentic as well. In that, should you be hiring people with multifamily experience, or do you hire people that
Hmm.
have no idea what multifamily is? Do you have a stance on that? And kind of going back to something you said early in the conversation, being in Lincoln, there's not like 10,000 multifamily experts necessarily roaming the streets. So how do you balance that when you're looking for your team members?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have that realistic component of I don't have a large pool likely of people who have both of those areas of expertise. So I think it's role dependent.
Hmm.
It's not going to be a simple answer from me, but it's going to be role dependent. Do I need somebody who's far more of an expert on coding and websites, more than they are a multifamily expert? And their learning curve will be multifamily, or specific to my sales enablement role, I probably need somebody who's very knowledgeable in multifamily, and they can learn our systems and our processes within marketer. And then really their learning curve is like some more traditional marketing knowledge. So
Mm,
I think it's role dependent. And it's also, again, understanding like what your internal capabilities are and really what the expertise of your existing folks on the team look like, and how they'll be able to support this new team member and get them up and
yeah.
running.
Yeah, speaking of building the right team, something that I talk a lot about is the sort of handshake between marketing and sales, and how go to market strategies and plans need a sales focus at the end, because the leasing team
Hmm.
needs the best chance of success for their lease ups. That's not necessarily something that I've seen across the board being agreed with. I think it's important because I think a leasing team needs to have more than a friendly face to close a deal, because at the end of the day it's sales, and maybe marketing has helped teed that up, but at the end of the day there is this sales component, I think. But I'm curious, I mean, you're in this every day. What is your take on the topic?
Yeah, I think the most I work, and I head all of our go to market and launches for, particularly on the marketing side for our new developments. I never work more closely with leasing than I do in our product developments or our go to market launches, because I think you're exactly right. Marketing and sales not only like need to align fully, but they need to work hand in hand on all things leasing. There's some very fast paced goals that we need to meet, and we need to meet together, and we need to iterate very quickly on what those levers look like, whether it's advertising or what the audience and what the feedback is from prospective residents, and how we need to change our marketing to accommodate what their feedback has been.
Mm,
And I think no matter the circumstance, whether a property is in lease up, is stabilized, or even is experiencing occupancy issues, the marketing and on-site teams must be fully aligned. Otherwise, we're wasting a lot of time and money. And true, we need to agree to what our performance metrics are and how we will assess success. So is it lead generation, budget performance, gross potential rent, NOI, leasing velocity, so
mm,
on and so forth.
mhm,
And then specific to lease ups too, the go to market plan is crucial. So we start our go to market plans anywhere from like 12 to 24 months in advance. And as we get closer to opening, I speak with the property teams multiple times a week, and we work in tandem on our leasing velocity. And like I said before, what levers we really need to adjust to meet and hopefully exceed our occupancy goals.
mm. That brings up a question that I get a lot, and it has to do with, well, how are you starting your go-to-market plan a year out or 2 years out? We're used to doing it 3 months from CO, not a year out,
Mhm.
certainly not 24 months out. Is that an idea that you had to sort of bring into your organization and get everyone on board? Because I feel like, to make a blanket statement, I don't think that's typically done in the industry. More groups are certainly starting to do it, but is that something that
Mhm.
you had to usher in yourself?
I think, no, I didn't have to usher it in myself. And I think operators are starting to learn the value of marketing and the value of branding. And I think what really kicked off those early, and why it's 12 to 24 months in advance of opening, is we have a more concerted branding effort for our properties. And that conversation starts basically when we break ground. And we're starting to name the property and build the brand and do the market research on what this brand really needs to emanate, and then how that brand is going to also be present within the walls of our building as well.
Mm.
Um, that should not happen 3 months before your opening. It's way too late then.
Mhm.
And two, like marketers, everybody's busy, right? But marketing is really busy with all of these other activities. And so to make sure that we have the brand and the voice and the messaging in a really good place so that we can start planning those next activity pieces, which is the website is the next biggest thing. And we can start planning for that. And we have the website launched, and other activities like email and lead generation are at a very specific point in the process leading up to when we open, so that when we open, like, we're not begging for leads to come through their door. We have significant brand awareness in the market already, and I think that alleviates some of our paid
Mm.
efforts as well.
I want to circle back to the sales and I guess specifically leasing team piece and kind of pull on that thread a little bit, because as the queen of your castle, so to speak, I know that you want to see performant marketing plans in properties that are doing really well in lease up. And I'm curious for you how important you tie sales experience to on-site leasing teams or leasing contacts that are really running point for you at your properties.
Yeah. I like every other business in this world for the most part, we are in the business of sales. And so all functions need to be fully focused on sales. How can we get the best quality traffic for the least amount of cost and convert at the highest rate? And magic is somewhere right in between those three. And there's a lot of different personalities or backgrounds that makes a successful leasing professional, whether it's more consultative or they really understand the technology and the marketing and sales funnel, or one who really creates urgency. It just depends on the property and the audience too, of like what type of sales professional is going to work best and serve the best experience to those audiences. I think more than anything, like in other industries, we're not unique in this manner, is that a great salesperson has to be genuinely willing to help the customer and then guide them towards the path of purchase.
Mm.
If we're not if we're not excelling in the bottom of the funnel sales activities, if we're not converting, then nothing that we do at the top and middle of the funnel is really ultimately going to matter. Um, Renters don't self qualify and convert like they did 2 years ago, which, as business people in multifamily, we all really loved. We're just playing an entirely different game now.
Mm. Let's dig into that a little bit. When you say that renters don't self-qualify and or convert like they did in 2022, what do you mean by that? What are you seeing?
Yeah, in our markets, it was um, there wasn't enough vacancy to meet demand. So there was more demand than there were units, and I think there were other economic dynamics at the time which caused retention to increase a lot as well. And so what we saw is people were converting at a really high rate, like an unseen rate before. And I think everything's leveling out to pre-COVID era of what we've seen in terms of um, website traffic, interest in properties, like initial inquiries, and then conversion of that as well. We're starting to normalize. So it's not that it's less than it was 2 years ago, but it was very, very strong 2 years ago.
Mm.
A resident really didn't have a choice. Once they saw a unit was available to rent, they knew that they had to hop on that right away. And now that there's more, especially in our markets, there's just more new buildings, more new developments, and so they have choice as well,
Yeah.
which is good the market as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for the market. Interesting times, though, I would say right now for marketing teams in multifamily. There's been a lot of shifts in the industry, a lot of shifts on the financial side of the industry, certainly.
Hmm.
What are you specifically focused on right now? Like kind of coming up on mid 2024 and beyond. What are you looking ahead to?
Yeah. I think just driving efficiency anywhere we can, and making our dollar stretch farther. And I'm not going to say anything that hopefully any other business isn't looking into right now, particularly on the operator side and multifamily, but automation and AI and how to balance that with human touch. So we're really hyper focused on again, those bottom of the funnel activities right now and what that looks like for the consumer or the prospective resident, and making sure that automation doesn't come without personalization, and making sure that we are still serving exceptional experiences regardless of what technology component is being deployed at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I want to bring up that you mentioned to me when we spoke last had to do with the concept of revenue marketing. And to be honest, it was a newer term for me and not one that I've heard from many other marketing leaders in the industry. Revenue management, I've been hearing a lot about in the last year and had discussions about that. But revenue marketing, how is that defined and how does that work in multifamily and how does that kind of like tie into your role?
Yeah. Truthfully, I have a habit of taking frameworks from other industries, which is, I think is really healthy for us in multifamily. We in multifamily have really increased our pace of technology and just bringing our entire industry up to speed that on things that other industries have been doing for years and years. So again, I have a habit of bringing other frameworks and learnings from other industries into multifamily. So revenue marketing maybe is a unique term specific to multifamily, particularly on the operator side, but it is a term used when marketing and sales are in a really good rhythm and wholly focused on revenue metrics, including lead generation and other marketing activities that's most impactful to the bottom line. So maximizing revenue, cutting costs. And it looks really similar in a multifamily organization. We have a finite amount of product to sell, and we want to make the most impact both to customers and in whatever metric the property or the organization is focused on at the time. And again, it's all about that rhythm between marketing, sales, and operations. And I feel like we've done a really good job at that in my organization.
Mm. When you are hiring team members and bringing people on board, how important is it to maybe it's state the obvious, right? Because as you said, everyone's in the business of selling something, but how important it is for new team members to come on board and understand the concepts of revenue marketing, of sales, and like at the end of the day, we can do pretty pictures, we can turn the dials on things and so forth, but we need to make money and be sort of productive at the bottom line. Do you make that a big point to kind of get people on board with that, or is that like a learned trait that people start to assimilate to as they get more comfortable with the company?
Yeah, I think it's both. So I think it's, you can have that innate ability to understand whether something is productive to the outcome that you're trying to achieve or the output that you're working towards. It's also can be learned and it should be learned. For those folks in management who oversees functions or teams, helping define like what is productivity and what does that look like on a day-to-day basis is really important and helps again just provide that clarity to employees of this is what's important, or this task or project that I'm working on, this is what's important. These other ones fall down the list in terms of prioritization. And we talk about that a lot on the marketing team, particularly on the creative side. So we could spend 10 hours on a creative project, but sometimes we get a little bit of like an analysis paralysis. There's 10 right answers, and we just need to choose one and move on. And so we've done a really great job at that as a team over the years, particularly on the creative side, or even in the digital side too, of what call to action is going to work best, or what
Mm-hmm.
color should this button be. Sometimes it's just picking something and moving on. And you probably won't see the difference between if you have a blue button or a yellow button.
Mm, interesting. I want to, so as we start to wrap up, I want to tap into your recommendations for marketers that are listening to this podcast or watching this podcast with you, and they're probably looking for their next career move. Maybe they're unhappy in their job, or maybe they've been seeking the next role for quite a while now. um, what advice would you give them? I mean, it's again, it's different times, 2024. It's not 2019 anymore. How would you tell them to proceed? Like what pieces of advice would you impart on them?
hmm I think defining what your passion areas are and going all in. Um, I really believe in work-life balance and like working in or for an organization and in a product or an environment that you're really passionate about. Um, it's just going to make your entire life so much better. So again, figure out what that is and go all in. Maybe it's not a right now thing, maybe it's your next step thing. And then read, write, listen, and connect with other like minded individuals or even people you aspire to be like in the next year to 3 years. And I think specifically, you need to speak loud about your accomplishments. Clarify who you are through all of the chaos out there. Someone once said to me, you are the CEO of your own career. And I think people should really take that to heart. And then make your intention known to team leaders and recruiters at companies you're interested in. So DM them on LinkedIn or request for even in person or virtual coffee. Most people, particularly if they're in management or leadership, they're always hiring. Um, not maybe there's not a role open, but they're always willing to have connections. And I think always too, like we've been in those shoes too. So we want to help your career progress as well.
Hmm.
um, and find a mentor and someone who can challenge you, specifically give you both guidance and constructive feedback. So if you're in a constant state of curiosity and growth, I think that that's really important. And then, as much as you possibly can within your current role or organization, you should try and pick up tasks or projects outside of the current scope of your role. There's always things you're going to fall short on skill wise. So, as much as you can skill up in those areas, that is going to lead to your next career step, that will be important.
I think that's really important to. I'll double down on those recommendations. I would say, it's not uncommon for us to get 1 or 2 thousand applicants for a role, and to be honest, 98% of those applicants are immediate no's for one reason or another. And that 1 or 2% that stands out are people that are very, very clear about what their intentions are. They're very clear about what they
hmm
want to go after. And to your point, they're very loud about what they have accomplished so far and how that fits into or dovetails into the role that they may be seeking. It's just a slight change of how to approach these jobs, but I think it's super important. So you make some really good points there.
Yeah, nobody else is going to talk about what you do and what you know more than you. And especially as marketers, like we have to think about marketing ourselves too, as like, yes, of course we are a person, but like we are a product and we have an expertise. So tailoring your resume and your entire like professional being, like thinking about it as a marketer. I
Right.
think we don't do that enough as marketers. We don't market ourselves well enough like we do the products that we're marketing day in and day out.
Exactly. It's like kind of the old joke that you do something all day for somebody else. You no longer want to do it for yourself for fun or to sort of, continue to grow in your own personal passions. But I think that's a really important point. Well, as we wrap up, I always like to hit guests with a rapid fire question or two. And in this case, I know that you're a big reader, big fan of books, and I know that you have a couple recommendations. So why don't you hit us with those and tell us why you give your recommendation?
Yeah. Like I said, being that inquisitive person and learner, like goes through every part of my personal and professional life. And um, I can't just share just one. I have to share two. And so the first is the first is Hook Point: How to Stand Out in a 3 Second World by Brendan Crane. It's a really great book that reinforces much of how we should approach marketing and consumer experiences, particularly in the digital landscape today. And the second, it's a little bit worn and torn because I've read it a few times.
Oh,
But The Advantage: Why Organizational Health Trumps Everything Else. Oh, you have it too.
I've got it
Perfect.
too.
It's such a good book. Why Organizational Health Trumps Everything Else in Business. by Patrick Lencioni. He's the author of The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. But I really love the advantage because it's both a commentary and framework for creating organizational health at the top levels and ensuring you operate or how you operate creates and reinforces clarity. So for me, it's both like really inspirational and actionable. And anybody who is looking to create a company culture that puts employees at the center of its purpose, I think that this is a really great book to read once and then read every year at a minimum. I don't know. I just love this book. So
Those are great recommendations, and we'll definitely get them in the show notes for listeners to follow up on. Man, Autumn, the time always flies by. Thank you so much for joining me. There's only one more thing to do, and that's to roll out the red carpet and let the listeners know where they can find you online.
absolutely. So I'll be at AIM in May. So find me on LinkedIn and let's connect, or have a group gathering or coffee or anything. The other thing I would say too is just connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a DM. I'm always looking for reasons to have in person or virtual coffee. Although, again, I know I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska. Very rarely people travel here for work. Although there is one person who's happens to be traveling to April or to Lincoln in April, and so we're going to have lunch. But yeah, just connect with me on LinkedIn, and I love to talk all things marketing, multifamily, um, agency support, all those things. So sales enablement, technology.
Great. I love it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Autumn is a great follow on LinkedIn, shares a lot of wonderful insights. Been a pleasure to have you on today, Autumn. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.